disturbing Korean games, Iceberg. That's my second Iceberg video and I'm still learning, so if I make any mistakes or if you want to see any improvements, let me know in the comments down below. Something I forgot to mention in the last video is that the way this Iceberg is structured is how underrated the games are will be lower, not how disturbing it is. Even though the Iceberg is about disturbing video games, I want people to find actual unknown games or underrated games they haven't played, instead of just treating this video as just a list and just when they finish watching it they just click off and then think about it. So hopefully you find some new games that you want to try out after this video. The first one on the surface level, White Day, a labyrinth named school. It's widely regarded as one of Korea's defining examples of Korean horror games, originally developed by South Korean studio Sunori and later remade ROI Games. The game takes place almost entirely inside a high school at night. The setting is very common in Korean horror media. Instead of relying on combat, the player must navigate the building while avoiding threats, most notably a patrolling janitor who cannot be defeated. This mechanic forces the players into a constant state of vulnerability as every movement carries a risk. The janitor's behavior is not fully predictable, which increases the tension because players cannot rely on memorizing patterns. The game also features multiple ghost encounters rooted in Korean folklore, each tied to a specific area of the school. The combination of stealth-based gameplay, puzzle solving, and branching story paths based on the player's choice creates a large experience where fear comes from both immediate danger and long-term consequences. The game structure, which includes multiple endings, reinforces replayability, which also encourages players to build different narrative outcomes tied to their decision. The last one on the surface level is a sequel to White Day, named White Day 2, The Flower That Tells Lies. It's built on the foundations established by the original game, but shifts towards a more segmented narrative format. Developed by Root Studio, the sequel divides the story into episodes that follow different characters, each offering a separate perspective on the same location and events. The structure means that no single playthrough provides a complete understanding of the narrative. Instead, players must piece together the story across multiple viewpoints, which creates a fragmented sense of reality. The setting remains centered around the school environment, but the storytelling focuses more on the hidden details and connections between characters. Like the original, the game avoids traditional combat, instead focuses on exploration, evasion, and puzzle solving. The horror elements are tied to not only the ghost encounters, but also to the gradual understanding of past events connected to the school, such as disturbing information across different perspectives, as players are never entirely sure whether they have the full picture or not. Now we're on to the mid layer, and the first one for this layer is called the Coma Recut. Developed by Devil Espresso Games, it presents a different approach by using two-dimensional side-scrolling format. Despite the shift in perspective, it retains many core elements associated with Korean horror. The player controls a student trapped in a distorted version of their school, where familiar locations are altered into something more threatening. The environment reflects a warped reality, often referred to in the game as coma dimensions. One of the defining mechanics is the presence of persistent enemies that stalk the player throughout the game. The enemy cannot be defeated. Instead, the player must only rely on hiding, managing stamina, and navigating through the environment carefully to avoid being caught. The game also incorporates a map system, item management, and limited resources, which adds layer to the strategy of survival. The narrative unfolds through notes, environment storytelling, and interactions with other players, many of whom appear within this altered reality. The tension is sustained by forcing the players to revisit areas while never allowing them to feel safe, as the threat can reappear at any time. This is the second game on this layer, the Coma 2. It expands on the system introduced in the first game while increasing both the scale and complexity of the environments. Also developed by the same studio, the sequel moves beyond a single school building into a larger interconnected world. This expansion introduces new areas, additional characters, and more interconnected level design, requiring players to manage navigating more carefully. The core gameplay loop remains focused on aversion rather than combat, but a main antagonist that continues to pursue the player throughout the experience. However, the sequel adds more depth through crafting system, allowing players to create items that can aid in survival. The narrative becomes more detailed, exploring the connections between characters and the nature of alternate dimension. By increasing the size and the number of things that can happen within it, makes the tension more intense. The player is not only avoiding immediate threats but also making decisions about resources and movement that can have long-term consequences. The last one on this layer is called Araha Curse of Yeha Island. As developed by Palmsoft, and the setting shifts away from urban environments into a more isolated location. The game takes place on an abandoned island and incorporates elements of Korean shamanism into its narrative and design. The culture influence is reflected in the themes, symbols, and types of supernatural entities that you encounter throughout the game. The gameplay is presented from a first-person perspective, emphasizing exploration and environment interaction. Unlike more structured horror games, this game allows the players to move throughout the island with a degree of freedom which can create uncertainty about where to go and what to expect. The horror is built through atmosphere, sound design, and the gradual introduction of supernatural elements rather than constant direct confrontations. The use of remote island setting removes familiar reference points which can contribute to a sense of isolation. The narrative is designed through environment clues and scattered pieces of information while requiring players to actively interpret what has occurred. Now we're on to the deep layer. The first game for this layer is called Anima Dark Fairy Tale for Adults. It's a game that released recently on 22 of April 2026, and a psychological horror that dives behind the veil of certain fairy tales. You must gather fragments of past to face the truth. Your choices can lead to salvation or more destruction. The game follows the 3-chapter structure as you follow the protagonist's journey to recover lost memories through chapters set in the hospital, school, and home. You can align with the NPCs to find shocking revelations such as self-harm, murder, suicide, and sexual assault. There are also 3 core systems that you have to manage. The first one being stress, sharp tension that numbs your senses as stress builds up, progressing normally becomes impossible, eventually leading to a downfall. Depression is the second system they have to manage. The deep hopelessness makes every step heavy as depression consumes you. The vault grows darker and drawing you closer to a tragic end. Karma as the last system that you can manage, as every choices you make accumulates into heavy karma. This invisible burden will ultimately direct the final fate you must face in the decisive moment. The last game on this iceberg is a rogue one named Killer. It's also an indie game developed by a Korean developer, but compared to the other games, this game hasn't released. But thankfully there's a demo that does get updated every once in a while, it seems like. Killer is a 3D adventure mystery game with multiple endings. Our protagonist named Valhalla seeks the killer of her mentor, a mentor she treasures like family, venturing to an unknown island to discover the culprit and seek revenge. Upon arriving on the island, you can gain special abilities called Resonance, which lets you dive into suspicious memories and discovering their past. You can combine the clues they have collected within dreams to identify the person who killed your master. Killer seems like an ambitious game, though sadly there still isn't any release date for it. It seems extremely interesting and something I want to put on this list so more people can find out about it. Hopefully in this iceberg you guys found a couple of games you haven't heard of and are willing to check them out. Thanks for watching this video. Leaving a like, comment, and subscribing would mean a lot. Also see you guys next time with another video.